Hello and welcome everyone to today's webinar, Service Desk Metrics, What and How to Measure to Gain the Most Value. A big thank you to Zendesk, who is the sponsor of today's webinar. My name is Scarlett and I am the Industry Analyst here at SDI. And I'm responsible for research and content creation, such as the Metrics Guide, which was sponsored by Zendesk also. I'm joined today by my colleague, Matt Greening, who we should have on the line. Hello, Matt.
Hi, Scarlett.
Hi, why don't you tell us a bit about your role here at SDI?
Yeah, sure. So I'm, as it says on the screen, I'm head of service transformation. The bulk of my role, a big part of it is auditing service desks against SDI's global standard for service desk best practice. And I'm going to talk a little bit about the metrics that are contained within the standard and how we can measure against some of those. And I picked out my top three, my favorite three to talk about in a bit more detail.
Great, thanks very much for that, Matt. Just a quick reminder that if you want the mini guide metrics for the service desk, you can download a copy from the Zendesk website if you go to the link on screen. And if you have any questions during the webinar, please put them in the comments section or the question section and we'll try to get to them at the end. So I'll quickly discuss what I'm going to talk about today. But firstly, why are we talking about metrics in the first place? Well, new technologies like self-service, automation and machine learning mean that the service desk is evolving and service desk performance has to transform with it to meet business and customer demands. And metrics can help the service desk to do that. But the trick is knowing what to measure, how often, and what to do with the data. So in my section of the webinar, I'm going to take you through the benefits and uses of metrics on the service desk, how often you should measure your metrics, what to consider when deciding what metrics to measure, how to monitor performance in a way that is efficient, and how to measure qualitative metrics like customer experience, and finally, what you can do with your metrics once you've measured them. Also, there's a prize for anyone that can keep a tally of how many times I say metrics in the next 20 minutes. So why do we measure metrics? What are the benefits and the uses? Well, we measure them first and foremost to monitor performance. Metrics can also be an excellent way to demonstrate value to the business. So if you're meeting or exceeding your SLA targets or reports show improvements in a specific area like resolution times, then reporting this to the business executives can lead to better recognition of the service desk, as well as a sense of appreciation for the service desk itself. I've even seen some service desk use social media to promote an area their team has excelled in that week. And it's just a small way to promote the service desk, but metrics can definitely play a part in that role. And metrics can be the key to service improvement. Specifically, metrics are a way of measuring the performance of the service desk, as I said earlier, and changes in performance will ultimately allow you to set benchmarks to better monitor improvements in service. Metrics also show results of actions or changes in the past, which could influence and support decisions in the future, whether they're service desk-led or business-led. In the same way that history repeats itself, mistakes can also be repeated in businesses, and metrics can help reduce the negative impact that a poorly informed decision could have. However, although metrics can provide the service desk with the ability to prove their worth and improve their service, there's also a risk in measuring them too frequently. Measuring metrics on a daily or weekly basis can become time-consuming and cause the data to lose value, and you could end up spending more time measuring than implementing improvements. Certain areas should be monitored on a daily and weekly basis where appropriate, whereas others are better suited to being measured quarterly or annually. But you need to find a balance that suits your service desk. And you may also want to consider what your customers want. For example, if your customers want to see this data daily, you need to find a way of producing that efficiently and in a way that doesn't impact performance. However, if your customers are not interested, then producing reports that no one's going to read is obviously a waste of time and resources. So now I'm going to talk you through deciding what to measure, and there are several factors to consider to help you decide this. Firstly, you need to consider what kind of service you want to provide. Also, ask yourself how this aligns with the business's strategy, as well as the service desk vision and mission statements. You need to consider what the business and customers are interested in and what they think is important. And lastly, you should consider any SLA commitments that you may have, as this may have a strong influence on what you decide to monitor. So now, instead of telling you what to measure, I'm going to explain how to balance the scope of your metrics to ensure the best results. Rather than focusing on specific areas of your service, it can be more beneficial to have a set of metrics that covers the whole of the service desk. This allows, for a better overview and assessment of performance over a wider range of services and provides a solid base for monitoring improvement. This can be really helpful when implementing an improvement or change, as a blend of metrics will allow you to observe how this affects other areas of service. A good method to create this blend is to establish 4 or 5 critical success factors, which can be based on the factors we established earlier. And your CSF should center around key areas like responsiveness, quality of communication, effective resolution, performance, employee satisfaction, and customer perception. Within each of these, setting a few relevant KPIs can help you to measure how your service desk is performing in those areas, as well as how each area impacts another. So let's take a closer look at each of those CSF areas individually. So responsiveness would include metrics like call wait times or response times across all communication channels. These are fairly common metrics, and with the right tool reporting capabilities can be fairly easy to measure. So if the goal is to improve responsiveness, then this CSF will be useful. However, if, for example, a service desk manager wants to improve response rates, this may have an impact on first contact resolution and ultimately performance against SLA targets, as analysts will be trying to increase their availability by reducing call duration, doing less diagnostic work, and escalating minor issues unnecessarily. But this is where having a blend of metrics comes in, and I've tried to capture that in this diagram. And it's clearly important to have a CSF surrounding the quality of the communication between your customers and the analysts and the rest of the service operation. KPIs within this area should be based around questions such as, do tickets have the right information? Are calls being handled in an effective and efficient manner? Are your analysts displaying excellent customer service? So analysts will need to understand what's expected of them and how this will be monitored and measured. Focusing on quality can benefit the customer experience as well as improve the efficiency of the service desk, but ensuring that analysts are utilizing excellent customer service skills and are handling calls efficiently doesn't ensure that calls are being resolved effectively. So for this, you need to have a CSF surrounding effective resolution performance. Metrics in this category include first contact resolution or fulfillment, SLA performance, and reopened tickets. Monitoring KPIs such as these will ensure that analysts are meeting SLA targets without escalating tickets unnecessarily or spending too long on one solution. However, pressuring analysts to meet targets in several areas can be stressful, which emphasizes the importance of monitoring employee satisfaction. It's so important to have a CSF around the happiness, satisfaction, or motivation of your internal team. And if service desk staff are not happy with their work environment, other things will begin to be affected by their mood. So potentially a happy, motivated team will be more effective in achieving and exceeding targets. To measure employee satisfaction, service desk managers could send out their own weekly survey for their direct staff with a simple question such as, are you happy in your role? Or something along those lines, and have a comments box underneath. A single question in a weekly survey is useful to indicate the mood of the team, quickly showing the impact of any newly introduced service or major change. It's also important to show your employees that any comments are listened to and maybe using them as discussion points in team meetings. Furthermore, happy and satisfied employees providing excellent customer service can lead to better customer experience and perception. So your analysts are happy and providing excellent customer service, but are your customers satisfied? Let's take SLA targets, for example. Typically, customers aren't particularly interested in the SLA target itself, but more that their needs and expectations are being met. Therefore, setting SLA targets highlighting the best possible service for a proportion of customers can lead to a poor perception of the service desk. And what I mean by this is that if an SLA target states that your service desk will answer 80% of calls within 30 seconds, this will only meet customer needs 80% of the time, with no specific response time for the remaining 20%. And this can lead to a negative customer perception. This type of target can also affect the behavior of analysts, particularly in the case of resolution times, where the focus is on preventing tickets from breaching SLA, which means that tickets where targets have already been breached become a lower priority instead of higher. A solution to this would be setting SLA targets that encompass all customers. For example, 100% of calls will be answered in, say, 90 seconds. So 80% of calls may still be answered in 30 seconds, but now there's a realistic expectation for the remaining 20% of customers. And this is a good way to ensure better customer perception and improve the customer experience. So those are the areas of your CSFs could cover. However, there's still an issue with SLAs, namely that they can cause service desk managers to focus on individual metrics rather than analyse them in conjunction with others to understand the bigger picture. For example, red, amber, green, or RAG statuses are commonly used to visually represent whether the service desk is hitting SLA targets. But there's something called the watermelon effect, which some of you may be familiar with. Simply put, it's when a target is appearing to be met, but if you take a deeper look into that metric, it will tell a different story. Furthermore, they tend to focus on quantitative measures, such as first contact resolution or fulfillment or response times. They can lack quality measures for metrics such as customer experience and employee satisfaction. You should want to know if your customers are satisfied, and if they're not, you should definitely want to know why this is and whether other customers are having similarly poor experiences. But it can be difficult to measure this and translate it into numbers or contextualize it. The easiest and perhaps one of the most efficient ways of doing this is through surveys, specifically event or periodic surveys. Typically, an event survey is sent out when a ticket is closed or a request is fulfilled, and some service desks do that every 5th or 10th ticket, but you've got to work out what works for your service desk individually. As I said when I briefly talked about employee satisfaction surveys, the key is to keep it very simple. If you give a customer 20 questions, they may not have time to fill it in, and a survey with just one question is much more likely of having a higher response rate. This should be fairly generic. For example, were you happy with the service you received? And following this, there should be a comments field where customers can provide any specific feedback. You may want to have a follow-up question in the survey triggered by a negative response to get more detail out of the customer's dissatisfaction. This process should also take into account complaints, comments, suggestions, and general feedback. So finally, I'm going to talk about what to do with metrics once you've got them, so who to report them to and how they can feed into service improvement. Service desk managers should create performance reports based on the needs and requirements of the target audience. For example, you could have top-level highlight reports for senior management, detailed performance reports for each support group, individual reports showing activity of service desk analysts, as well as customer reports. There may also be metric reports that aren't shared but are used by the service desk manager to monitor the performance of the team. Reports should contain commentary, so analysing and finding meaningful patterns within the data. And what's more, you may think that you only want to show the service desk in a good light and report on where the service desk has performed well. And while it's important to highlight and promote successes, you also need to identify areas for improvement and demonstrate this to the business with context. Analyst reports can be reviewed in one-to-ones to allow the analyst to know how well they're working and where they can improve, or whether there are any reasons that they're not performing as well as they could. It's also possible to highlight any training needs that may be necessary to improve the work of the team. Furthermore, by taking time to invest in your team and work with them to improve, it's very likely that staff morale and satisfaction will improve. So that's how you demonstrate performance and improvement in a valuable way. But how do you monitor improvements in the first place? When starting a service improvement program or initiative, beforehand you need to define what success looks like for your service desk. Is it better customer feedback? Is it a higher employee satisfaction? Or is it senior resolution rates? By understanding how you'll measure success, you can establish a goal to work towards, which can prevent the program becoming ineffective or moving the service desk in the wrong direction. A good place to start is to analyse the data you have. Identify the problem you're trying to solve by creating a benchmark, and then use that to define what success looks like to you. Furthermore, we've discussed the potentially damaging effects of measuring and trying to improve one specific metric, but there are certainly circumstances where improving performance in one area is necessary. But it is imperative that you do this in a way that minimally impacts other areas and sufficiently monitored so that you can quickly spot if other areas begin to suffer. One method to start improving your service is to measure a particular area in need of improvement, perhaps measure it daily for a short period of time, and then return to the previous cycle. This means that you will almost constantly be aware of whether attempts to improve that area of service is successful or other areas begin to be negatively impacted. So in summary, metrics are an incredibly useful tool on the service desk, and they allow managers to monitor multiple areas of service. They can allow them to highlight successes and areas for improvement and keep an eye on how well the service improvement attempts are working. But if they're not used efficiently, metrics can become a waste of time and resources and potentially cause more harm than good. It could be more beneficial and efficient to build up individual metrics into CSFs that cover multiple areas of your service to allow you to monitor how work to improve one area impacts the others. Lastly, it's necessary to understand what success means to your service desk and how metrics can help you achieve that. So thank you for listening. I'm now going to hand over to Matt, who will talk about the SDI standards and some of his favourite metrics within that.
Thanks, Scarlett. We're just going to hand over from one presentation to another. And while we do that, Scarlett, I'm very interested in this prize you were offering for guessing the number of times you say the word metrics. Is that something that we're going to award now, or are we including my uses of the term metrics?
That's entirely up to you, Matt, but just be aware that the prize is just the satisfaction of winning. It's not an actual physical prize.
And can I? Because I was going to enter if it was a good prize, but if it's just satisfaction, then I'm not interested. I'm out. Thank you, Scarlett. So I'm going to talk about some of my favourite metrics, my top 3 brilliant metrics from the SDI standard. But I think it needs a bit of context, a bit of background, so that to make sure that everyone who's listening understands what we mean by the SDI standard, because you may not be aware that that it exists or how we certify against it. So as I say, my big part of my role is as an auditor. I go around the country, actually go around the world, and audit service desks against SDI's global standard for service desk best practice. And so I'll give you a brief understanding of what that actually means. The standard is it's 132 criteria that define what a brilliant service desk looks like. Those 132 criteria are split into 2. They're split into enablers, so the things that should be in place for a brilliant service desk, and results, the evidence that those things are working. And within those 2 sections, there are 9 concepts. You can see them on the screen there. You've got leadership, people management, policy and strategy, resources, processes and procedures. They're your enablers. And then your results are around employee satisfaction, the customer experience, social responsibility, and management information and performance results. And that's the one we're really talking about today. There are 2 things that are absolutely fantastic about the standard. The first is that it's kept up to date and constantly refreshed. So every 3 to 4 years, we release a new version of it. We're on version 7 at the moment. That was released in September 2016, and it's not something we just do on our own. It's not SDI's singular view on what a brilliant service desk looks like. We bring in contributors from industry, experts on the subject. So the likes of Barclay Ray, who's chair of IT Service Management Foundation, or Kaimar Karu, who up until recently was head of product development at Axelos. So he's been driving product and development for ITIL over the last 5 years. And on as well as those people, there's a number of industry practitioners, service desk managers, service delivery managers who are out there doing the job, and they get involved in reviewing and updating. So we'll start the process again in about a year's time. We'll kick that off, and then it usually takes 9 months to a year to refresh and get the standard to reflect the changes in what best practice looks like. I said there were 2 things that were brilliant. So the other brilliant thing about the standard is it's free. You can go to our website and you can download a copy. You will have to put in some contact details, and it means that you'll have to take a call from one of our trusted advisors, but that's literally the worst thing that can happen. Now, each of the 132 criteria has 4 maturity levels, and that's how we assess, how we do the certification process. So we would go to a service desk, we'll do an assessment, 2 days, we would talk about the service and find out how it aligns to the standard, you know, without even trying, without going through a process of alignment or improvement. And at the end of that, the service desk gets a report. They know exactly where they are and exactly what they have to do to achieve certification. We come back in 9 months' time and do that audit over 4 days. It takes a lot longer because we're looking at objective and empirical evidence. At the end of the 4 days, in most cases, the service desk is certified, is awarded certification, and then we'll come back a year later to make sure all of those great things are still in place. Look for some areas of improvement, and then a year after that, we're back again. So it's a 3.5 year, 4 year program designed to improve a service desk. These are the maturity levels, so it's effectively a score out of 4, and you need to score 2.5 to pass. So it's a fairly robust standard, and we have various levels of attainment. That top level there, the 5-star world class, slightly separate process for that. We at the moment only have 2 service desks who've achieved and maintained that level, which is CGI Logica and O2. So yeah, but I think we probably have about 60 plus service desks in the program overall, and on all find it very, very rewarding. There are a number of significant benefits, and I very briefly go through this because we do want to talk about metrics. The greatest benefit is to the organization around targeting, prioritizing, and delivering business value in your improvement program. So when we create that report that tells you as a service desk what you need to do to achieve certification, that is not a generic report. That is based on what we've seen and heard time with you. We get to know the service desk very quickly. And so we wouldn't recommend anything that was not feasible, that you couldn't feasibly achieve. If you didn't have the money to invest in a certain area, or culturally there was a reason why you couldn't do something, we would never recommend it. And another big point is a differentiator. If you're working in an organization where you are selling service desk services or IT services, it's a brand, it's a logo, a badge of honor, if you like, you can put on your website and put on your bids, that will help differentiate you from your competitors. And we are finding that more and more invitations for tender are including things like must be an accredited service desk, and you can't really get that anywhere else but from the SCI. So fantastic for your organization. For your customers, well, the quality of service goes up, of course, we would say that, but there's a great emphasis on customer engagement, and so you'll find that as you go through the program and improve that engagement, trust increases, relationships are built, and you start to create that customer advocacy. And within the team, as I said, there's a lot of work involved, quite a bit of work involved, and so it's a huge sense of achievement when you get the award, when you're accredited against the standard. I'm fortunate enough to be able to deliver that good news fairly frequently, and typically it's a room chock full of people who all want to know the outcome, and then there's other people the other side of the door peering in through a window trying to find out how they've done, and as soon as you give that good news, people get their phones out and stop listening to me rattling on and start texting their team and often their family as well, who have been part of the journey. So it is a huge sense of achievement. Well, we want to talk about concept 8, which is around management information and performance results. Well, I'll call it performance results from now on. It's a bit of a mouthful. Now, there are 39 criteria. As I said, there's 132 criteria in total. 39 of them are within this one concept within performance results. The first 3 are fairly generic. They're about, firstly, the first criteria is around capturing the data and using it to review performance generically. And the second criteria is around producing reports based on that information and sharing that with stakeholders. The third one is around target alignment, so making sure you have smart targets for those metrics and that you're analysing the data. So there's 36 actual metrics that we in standard ask you to report on, and they have the same levels of maturity. Each of the 36 have the same 4 levels of maturity that we're reviewing when we do the audit. Level 1 is that you've got the data, it's in the tool, you're comparing it to a target for at least 3 months. Level 2 is that you've been reporting on it for 6 months and you're trending towards your target. So let's just say your first contact resolution target is let's say 60%, and when you started a year ago, 6 months ago, you were around 40 to 50%, but now you're nudging the 55%, not quite achieving that target, but you're trending in that direction. And of course, reporting it to stakeholders, so sharing that information with whoever is reasonable and appropriate to share with. Level 3 is that over a space of a year, your results are consistent. And then level 4 is that you're actually analysing that data, you've got commentary, and you're able to articulate the derived value. The reason we do that is because in the past we've turned up at audits and people have shown us some fantastic metrics, and when we ask what they use it for, they said, well, we print it out whenever you turn up, which is, I must admit, a little dispiriting. So we have 36 metrics. That is a lot of metrics. So I want to make the point, it's very important, you don't have to report on them all. We have some very, very high level, very mature service desks that are in the program that choose not to report on a high number of those metrics. It just means you have to do better on the ones you don't report, the ones you do report, to make up for the ones you don't report. So you have to choose those metrics that are important to your customers, add value to your service, and reflect the performance of your team. It's, as Scarlett was saying, you need to choose the metrics that are right for you and your service. And it shouldn't be an onerous task. It should be as straightforward as you can make it. And a fantastic ITSM tool like Zendesk will be able to support you with this. You should get to a point where just a click of a few buttons, or even through automation, you will be able to get the reports you need out of the system. So I've picked out 3 of the best, 3 of my favorites. Now, there'll be some in there in the 36 that you already report on this, the standards, the classic service desk metrics, the likes of the number of incidents and call abandon rate or first level resolution. What I want to pick out is some of the ones that are less frequently reported on, and ones where you can report on them in slightly different ways. The first one I'm going to pick on is backlog management. This is where you're reporting on the number of open tickets by age and assignee group. So how old is the ticket? Who's it assigned to? Now this can be looking at all of your tickets. It's possible to report on every open ticket, but that might be a little bit overwhelming. And if you've got a lot of open tickets that are actually fairly short term, then you're not adding a lot of value by looking at those. So you might want to consider looking at open tickets that have been open for X amount of days. Now for you that might be 3 days, it might be 5 days, it might be 10, it might be longer, and it depends on your service and what you're going to do with the data. What you could also consider doing is looking at the time since update as a measure to report on. So instead of tickets that have been open for more than 5 days, it could be tickets that have not been updated for 1 day, for 2 days, or for 5 days. And so you're ensuring that and looking at getting customer the latest information on the tickets. So why is this important? Why is it one of my favorites? Well, it's a measure that's important to customers. As Scarlett was saying, with SLA based reporting, when you're looking at SLA targets, the tendency is to focus on those that are about to breach, to try and prevent them from breaching. Once they're breached, they're never going to unbreach. So they're always going to be in that red zone rather than in the green resolved within target zone. And this allows you to focus on those tickets as well. With a lot of these metrics, it's a really fantastic opportunity for the service desk to get amongst the rest of the department and drive improvement, to go to the desktop team, to the application support team, to the network guys and say, this is all your open tickets, this is how long since you've updated them, what are you going to do about that? So it's a good opportunity for the service desk to really start pushing back at the rest of the department. The second metric I was going to look at is around bounce rate. Now, bounce rate is tickets that are reassigned to the service desk because they've got incomplete or incorrect content. So a ticket's been created, maybe an incident's been created, been assigned to a third line group who have returned the ticket without taking any action because it's not got the information in it that they need. This one's quite difficult to measure and to capture without a dedicated process or even sometimes a dedicated field. So what's one way you may choose to deal with this is to have bounced tickets to go into a specific queue. That might be the queue for the team leader and or the service desk manager. So every ticket assigned to them is a bounce ticket, or you may choose to have a generic queue that is called bounce tickets. Or you can have a tick in a box and you can measure those as well. Because if you report on all tickets that are assigned to multiple groups, you may find that you've got a number of false positives with tickets that have been naturally assigned to multiple groups because those people needed to be involved in the resolution. So that's what it is. That's how you can measure it. Why is it important? Well, it feeds into quality management. It's something that Scarlett was talking about earlier. It's a way of identifying those analysts that are repeatedly assigning tickets without capturing the right information. So you can develop those analysts and give them those extra training, make sure that it's completely clear to them what is expected of them. But it really, my favourite reason for liking this particular report is it demonstrates the value of operating level agreements. Now, an operating level agreement, or an OLA, is an agreement between two support groups that defines roles and responsibilities, lines of delineation, exactly what is expected of both groups as part of the incident process, as part of the problem process, potentially change as well. So this is where you would document what that second line or third line team, what they need to know, and they would capture it. I've been in several situations where you talk to the third line team and they're always assigning us tickets without the right information. Well, have you told them what information to put in? Well, they should know. They should know by now. They've been doing the job for ages. And I told that guy once. So I often have conversations like that. And OLA captures that information. It has to be a living, breathing document. You update it regularly because requirements change. So that's bounce rate. And the last of my three reports is incident caused by change. Now that's fairly self-explanatory. It is a report that shows the number of incidents that have been caused by a change. It works best when the change management process is within the tool, within the IT service management tool, because you can then quickly link an incident to a change and report on that. However, if you're not managing change within your tool, what you can do is capture the information during a major incident review. So you'll be in a major incident review. Why did we have that P1 ticket? Well, it was related to a change. Okay, we'll capture that in our incidents caused by change spreadsheet, and we were able to report on that. Now, the importance of this is, once again, service desk are there driving improvement throughout the team, but it's a really good one for allowing the service desk to get involved in change management and start taking a bit of a lead role in that process, and allows them to represent the customer as well. So they're my favourite three, and why I think they're so good. As I said before, you can download a copy of the standard on our website. Now, I appreciate there's a link in there and you can't click on that link, so I'll explain what the link means. If you go to our website, servicedeskinstitute.com, and go to the section called Service Desk Benchmarking, within there's a link, a button for Service Desk Standard. You can go there, put in your contact details, and you'll be able to download a copy of the standard. So thank you very much for listening. I'm going to hand over back to Scarlett, I think, for questions.
Yeah, brilliant. Thank you very much for that, Matt. We do have a couple of questions. We have one from Rohit, who asks, how do we measure quality of the communication? So just as a refresher, that would be questions like, do your tickets have the right information? Are calls being handled in an effective and efficient manner even? And are your analysts displaying excellent customer service?
So the process I would I would recommend something along the lines of a full end-to-end quality management process that will involve the team leader or a dedicated quality management person, reviewing calls if phone calls are your main route of communication, and listening in if possible, either live or listening to recordings, and evaluating that interaction. Now, you may have a code of practice that you can use to evaluate that the behaviors that you are looking for are being demonstrated, but you will need to document exactly what you are looking for, what is expected of your agents, your analysts, and then following that process through, having listened to the call, looking at the ticket that's associated with that call, and ensuring that has the right information. As I said, that may be captured in an OLA, or you may have a generic set of information in terms of name, phone number, the kind of things you would expect, but always getting the asset details of the items, the hardware that's got a problem, and always capturing the right method of communication, the way the customer would like to be contacted. So it's about working with your team and getting that list together.
And I suppose if there is a recorded call that's a very good example, you could use that in training.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely. And in terms of how often you do this, I'd recommend if you've got new members of staff, it would be part of their induction process. You can even in your one-to-ones listen back to the call together and ask the analyst to say, what do you think was good about that? What could you do differently? What would be better? But then as an analyst becomes more experienced and more mature, then you reduce the number. So you may choose to listen to 2, 3, 4, 5 calls and look at 2, 3, 4, 5 tickets per month. Whereas someone new, you may look at twice that. So it's about appropriateness for the analyst and for the team.
So we have a question from Paige, who asks, when commentary is required in metrics reports, how much detail is needed, or how much detail should you give?
Okay, well, there's a how long is a piece of string answer to that. But what I would do, what I would give you is my personal advice. This is how I would approach it. You need to talk to your audience and find out what they want, because I think the underlying, the subtext to that question is, should I be writing pages and pages? That's a lot of work. And what if no one reads it? And that can be quite dispiriting if you know no one's reading it. So what I would recommend is something along the lines of a highlight section, a lowlights, or an areas for improvement section, where you cover the top things that you pulled out of the stats. In terms of putting commentary on the stats, what I was taught, I had a fantastic manager. It's nearly 20 years now since I worked with this guy, Alan, his name was. But what he asked me to do when I was his service desk manager, he asked me to take each of the graphs, and instead of a title that said, this graph shows, or this chart shows the number of incidents that we've received this month, in the month of August, change that and from a title to a line of commentary. So the line would say the number of incidents in August has gone up since, compared to July because of this reason. And it would only be one sentence, maybe 2 if it required a bit more detail. So keeping it not too much of a labour-intensive task.
Okay, brilliant. So we also have a question from Robert, who says, what are some of the KPIs that can be linked to support teams' individual performance?
In the individual analyst's performance?
I expect so.
Yeah, okay. So again, it depends on your service desk. I know I'm putting this caveat on a lot of them. It depends on what the focus is and what you need to improve. I think Scarlett, your pentagram showing the 5 areas of focus and having that blend, I think that's so important. And I think we're recording this, aren't we? And you'll be able to go back and have another look at that diagram. But look at underpinning KPIs for each of those 5 points. So if you're running your events survey out of your tool, you will be able to link the analysts with the the ticket and with the survey response, so you will know what your analysts, how your analysts are scoring in terms of customer feedback. I think that's almost the most important. There's a phrase, a phrase I use a lot. It's not mine. It comes from Kate Zabrisi's book about customer service, which is the customer's perception is your reality. So I don't think to me, it's not so important that tickets are closed within a certain time and 80% have hit that target. I think it's more important that the customer was happy with that response, because it might not necessarily have been necessary to resolve a ticket within 2 days if the end user actually phoned up and said, I'm going to be out the office for 3 days, don't worry about it until I'm back, or whatever, if it wasn't important to the customer. So I think that's the measure to end all measure, is that the customer is happy.
Okay, awesome. I think we have time for one more question, and we have one from Yakub. Sorry if I'm pronouncing that wrong. But when I was talking about ensuring that your employees know that their comments are listened to, from comments in weekly surveys and things like that, Yakub wants to know how is the best way to go about ensuring that these are actioned on?
Well, I think what you're asking is a huge question about continual service improvement, and one that I'm happy to talk about at length. Continuing service improvement is about identifying areas for improvement in your service or in your organization and capturing those and identifying where the improvement lies and doing something about it. And I think the important point of the question is that you need to do something about it, otherwise it's pointless. So I think every service desk should have a continual service improvement plan. That sounds grander than it has to be. It could be a spreadsheet where you capture all these comments. So there's a few steps in the process, and I haven't prepared for this, so I'm going to miss a couple, I'm sure. But engage. Make sure that you are talking to your customers, talking to your staff, getting those areas for improvement, and then capture. So make sure that they go somewhere, that you put them in a spreadsheet or elsewhere, to be then reviewed, evaluated, and where an improvement is identified and can there's something you can do about it, and it's feasible, reasonable, and there won't be adverse impact, then decide what you're going to do and act. And if you've got a CSI plan and that you are all able to contribute to and all have access to, that's a way of making sure that things actually happen. So what you could do, this is off the top of my head, this could be the process. Each week the survey goes out. I'd always do these things on a Friday afternoon. People are in a better mood, and if you do it on a Monday morning, you'll get a less good response. But it has to be the same sort of time every week, so it's consistent. And have your service desk analysts say, out of 5, how happy are you? And what will typically happen is if there's a change or a new service introduced without proper process, then the mood will dip, and you can say to your bosses, you can say to the director of IT, look, this is the tangible impact that this change or this introduction had on my team. So you capture that information. If you see 2 people's scores dropped, then the chances are they've had an argument, and you can deal with that. So that's why it's important. But the comment section, you're right, and you then add those to an agenda for the next team meeting, and discuss it. This is what I comment. It was anonymous. This is a comment that's been made, and what do you think about it? Get the team to be involved, so they own that issue and they own the response to it. And then capture that in your CSI plan, which you can review in maybe not every team meeting. If you're having them weekly, it maybe you choose every 4 team meetings you have a look at your CSI plan. It's down to you, depends on how detailed it is, and then you follow the change, the improvement area through to completion.
Well, brilliant. Thank you very much for your time today, Matt. I think that's about all we have time for.
Fantastic. Okay, well, I've absolutely loved it. So thank you very much for having me.
You're very welcome. So just one more thank you to our sponsor Zendesk, and a reminder that if you want to download the metrics for the service desk report, you can do so by going to the link on screen. Thank you all very much for your time today. I hope you enjoyed it.